I don't. No. All right. Good evening, everyone, and thank you all for joining us. My name is Alyssa Karpenka, and I'm the event coordinator for McNally Robinson Booksellers in Saskatoon. This event is coming to you from Treaty 6 territory, the traditional lands of the Cree, Saulteaux, Dene, Dakota, Lakota, Nakota, and Métis nations. Just to note that this event is being live streamed, so please be aware of the webcam to your right. I'd also like to take this moment to encourage you to silence your phones for the duration of the event. It is my pleasure to welcome you to the Saskatoon launch of Phantom by Helen Power and published by CamCat Publishing. Thank you to Helen for being here tonight and for working with us to create this event. Helen Power is a librarian and writer living in Saskatoon. In her spare time, she haunts deserted cemeteries, loses her heart to dashing thieves, and cracks tough cases, all from the comfort of her writing nook. Her short stories range from comedy to horror, with just a hint of dystopia in between. Her debut novel, The Ghosts of Thorwald Place, was published in October of 2021 by CamCat Books and won gold in the IBPA Benjamin Franklin Awards for Best New Voice Fiction. Phantom is her second novel. I'll now turn things over to Helen. Please give her a warm welcome.
Everyone, thank you so much for coming. Yeah, this is my second baby. And it came out on Tuesday and I'm really excited. I was so excited to realize that it coincided nicely with a Friday the 13th to have the launch on. I was like, it's the perfect spooky day, especially in October. By the 13th of October, it's not very common. Anyway, yeah, so today what I wanted to do is read the prologue and first chapter, and then I can answer maybe some questions if you have any, and then we can sign. Also, I think as already mentioned, but I have a door prize, like little cards for a door prize over at the front if you want to fill out your name and email. And I also have swag to go with the different books if you are buying. So yeah. if you follow me on social media, you've seen me posting about this a lot lately. But basically, yeah, it's here. All right. So maybe I'll just get started. There is a character who's British, but I can't do that. I'm sorry. Like I was like trying, and then I was like, it's just I'm gonna embarrass myself. Oops. Okay. I'm just gonna. Been a month and a half. I'm not contagious anymore. I just still have a bit of a cough. I just want to like warn people so you're not worried. Okay. All right. Phantom. It won't be long now. I float amid the crowd, riding the wave of the shallow and elite that swim around me like school of fish in an aquarium. They have no idea there's a shark in their midst. Enthralled by my wit and beauty, partygoers converge upon me, eager to meet me, to be close to me, to know me. I feel like I am the honorary guest, despite the lack of invitation, despite no one knowing who I am or why I'm really here. I nurse my martini as I flit from conversation to conversation. They are all fools, dullards chattering about the exhibit as if they know anything about true art. True art takes risks. It deviates from the norm. It makes people feel uncomfortable, aroused, afraid. I am a true artist, though my work will never be on display like this, at an event so pretentious and asinine. My work isn't of traditional mediums. My expertise isn't as derivative as paint on canvas or molded blocks of clay. True creation comes from destruction. I know that I shouldn't have come, but I couldn't resist. My gaze roams the room. I'm a predator stalking my prey. I spot her immediately. Sticking out like a sore thumb in this crowd of the sophisticated and affluent, the girl has no idea what is about to happen to her. That she has been chosen. That she is about to make the ultimate sacrifice for art. Envy and anticipation course through me as I watch her clutch a glass in her flawless left hand. I've been broken for too long. It's kept me from my life's purpose, from sharing my vision with the world. But soon I'll be whole again. Soon my name will return to the lips of everyone in this city, whether they're admiring my craft or simply don't understand it. Soon I can get back to my art. It won't be much longer. Chapter 1. The event was disgustingly extravagant. Moonlight cascaded through the towering stained glass windows and pooled on the marble floor, which gleamed a garish silver and gold. Massive crystal chandeliers strained against the chain suspending them from the vaulted ceiling. The gentle strains of a violin drifted through the hall, only to drown in the loud hum of the guests' mindless prattling. The scent of floor polish cut through the overpowering mix of expensive perfume and cologne, mingling with the unmistakable stench of narcissism and pretension. All around me, people strutted about in their decadent outfits. Draping ball gowns, blinding diamonds, and expressions laced with condescension seemed to be the required uniform of the evening. I didn't belong here. I shifted uncomfortably in my dress, which I'd borrowed from my roommate, Hannah. The Danish goddess was at least one size smaller than me, and I was starting to feel it in the bust and hip areas of the slinky red number I'd found in the closet. I placed my empty martini glass, only my third drink of the evening, onto the platter of a waiter who brushed past me. I barely had the chance to grab a glass of red wine before he was gone. A splash of the red liquid sloshed over the glass rim, spraying my wrist. I tensed, my eyes roving over my dress, but I hadn't spilled any on it. Hannah was quiet and I didn't know her very well, but I was pretty sure that if I borrowed her dress without permission and returned it damaged, she would kick me out of our loft apartment. She was the perfect roommate. She was hardly ever around. She let me use the main living area as my creative workspace, and she sometimes covered my part of the rent. She kept to herself and never asked prying questions like, when was I going to sell something and why wasn't I a part of any art shows, even the lousy ones like this one that featured no talent whatsoever. It was the ideal living situation, and I didn't want to screw it up. I glanced around the hall. Satisfied that no one was looking my way, I surreptitiously bent my head and sucked the red wine off my wrist. Just at that moment, my eyes landed on a woman staring at me from over 40 feet away. She looked just like everyone else here, but her arm was swathed in a sleek black sling. Flushing, I spun around and hurried in the opposite direction, humiliation hot on my heels. I had no idea who that woman was. She was too far away for me to get a good look, but it would be just my luck that someone with influence in the art world would be the one to catch me casually licking myself at a black tie event. I pushed the embarrassment from my mind and didn't think of it again. Another half hour and several failed attempts at networking crawled by. I glanced around the hall, but of course there were no clocks mounted on the cold stone walls. I hadn't worn my watch because my cheap-ass timepiece would have been a dead giveaway that I didn't belong, and pulling up my phone would have had the same effect. Despite having no idea what time it was, I knew it was getting late. The reception would be winding down within an hour or two. I shouldn't have come. I hadn't planned to. I'd gotten the invitation in the mail 2 weeks ago, and I'd thought about declining despite the open bar. And Rita Tejal, one of my former classmates from college, was putting on an art exhibit. I hadn't heard from her since graduation, and part of me had assumed that she'd moved on, married, and given up the dream of being an artist with a capital A. But no, she persevered, and now she was displaying her work at the Grant Park Fine Art Gallery. The masochist in me decided to show up at the last minute. I needed to know what she did. I needed to see it for myself. I also couldn't pass up the free alcohol, even if it turned out to be watered down. I'd made the rash decision to show up, and despite the appetizers and endless supply of alcohol, I was regretting it. I'd already gone through the main exhibit. I'd expected to see something intriguing, inspiring, intimidating, but instead, Amrita's art was simply imitative. It had consisted of 3 narrow halls, the dull off-white walls mounted with television screens. On them, there was a woman, the same woman on each screen, but in different stages of undress. She was taking off her public persona, her business attire, her makeup, her facade, before retiring for the evening. The final panel, which took up an entire wall at the far end, depicted her standing in a window, stark naked, not even a robe or a strategically placed shadow to hide her nakedness. I'd suddenly felt exposed in that moment. I was that woman, naked, mounted high for all to see, in my too tight dress and fake Jimmy shoes. Unable to spot another waiter, I dropped my wine glass in a potted fern. I casually approached the buffet table and selected a shrimp cocktail. I tried not to be obvious as I wolfed it down. Since Hannah was hardly ever around, she didn't keep our fridge fully stocked. I barely had enough money to cover rent for my part-time job as a dealer at the Horseshoe Hammond. I wasn't exactly pitching in for fresh produce. My phone chirped and I glanced at the screen. It was my ex, Ben. I deleted the message without bothering to read it. He was awfully needy for a drug dealer. I told him I wouldn't give him the time of day after we broke up, and even though it was nighttime, I still wasn't going to respond to his texts. Roz, oh my goodness, you made it. I froze. Jumbo shrimp half lodged in my throat. My cheeks heated up as I forced myself to swallow. I turned around. Amrita, it's been so long. How have you in my words oozed insincerity. And Rita looked the same as I remembered, tall and elegant with smooth brown skin and her hair pulled back in an elaborate twist. But her outfit was different. This one screamed wealth and success, despite this being, as far as I knew, her first art show. My attention was caught by the strange tone of one of her irises. Had she always had different colored eyes? I'm doing really great, clearly, Amrita said, gesturing around the crowded hall. She was doing better than great. Everyone here had come to see her art. I couldn't even get so much as a form rejection letter back from the shitty little galleries around town, and she was having a show at Grant fucking Park. I love your exhibit. Very, unique. I had choked out the words. Amrita smiled slightly. Yes, the idea came to me in a dream. Well, her dreams were more unoriginal than those of a teenage high schooler. If I'd been paid a nickel for every time I dreamed I was naked and on display, I'd be a millionaire. I twisted my lips into a pleasant smile. I'm surprised you invited me. Amrita was watching me intently, wordlessly. She looked me up and down with her unnerving eyes. I love the dress. It's very risque. Who are you wearing, Abby? I smiled, though it felt more like baring my teeth. I hope there wasn't a shrimp caught between them. I'm not really sure. Someone else picked out the dress. That much was true. Who knew where Hannah had gotten it? Maybe it really was designer. More likely it was Target. I couldn't tell if she was buying what I was selling. She gave me a little smile. Aside from her initial enthusiasm at seeing me, she was very cool, calm, and collected. Nothing like the frenetic, energetic girl I knew back in college. Back then, I would be tempted to douse her with a bucket of cold water just to get her to shut up. Now I was begging for her to say something, anything to end the silence and quiet the storm inside my head. So, is this your first art show? I asked. I should have excused myself. What was I thinking, prolonging this torture? Jealousy reared its ugly head, and it took all my self-control not to gouge her perfect, hypnotic little eyes out. Yes, it is, Amrita said with a mysterious smile. I hope you enjoy the rest of the evening, but if you'll excuse me, I should be mingling. There are some important people here tonight. Even though I'd wanted the conversation to end, her words still felt like a slap to the face. I wish I'd thought of telling her I had places to be. As should I replied. I awkwardly spun around, swayed around another waiter carrying a tray, and swooped in, snatching up yet another martini. I took a deep breath as I surreptitiously glanced back to watch Amrita dissolve into the crowd. I supposed that could have gone worse. She could have asked me about my own art. Are you a friend of Ms. Tejal's? A vaguely British voice came from behind my ear. I tried not to flinch as hot breath tickled my neck. I turned around slowly and gave the speaker the once-over. A lazy smile clung to a remarkably unremarkable face. He wasn't tall, he had only a few inches on me. He had receding hairline and premature wrinkles lined his forehead, but the suit he wore clung nicely to his abdominal muscles, and it was a decidedly expensive suit. We aren't friends. We went to college together, I said with a wave of my hand. I didn't think you looked like you'd be friends with her, he replied. I narrowed my eyes. What do you mean by that? Could he tell that I didn't belong here? I bit back my retort when I caught sight of the Rolex on his wrist. Maybe I could get a free dinner out of him. I'll take that as a compliment, I said instead. He tossed me a knowing smile that was surprisingly attractive. I was suddenly glad that I hadn't been rude. I was interested in getting to know him a little better. I took a sip of another martini that had suddenly appeared in my hand. I casually looked away from the man, my eyes scanning the crowd, acting as if I wasn't interested in anything he had to offer. Are you an artist? Yes, I replied. I didn't elaborate. He didn't have to know that I worked part-time and that I poured every free moment into working on my sculptures, half of which I'd burned or thrown out the window in fits of rage when they were rejected or critiqued unfairly. My name's Sylvain Dufour, he says, primly in his British accent. I didn't bother to respond or even glance in his direction. He shifted slightly, as if trying to draw my attention. I finally deigned to give him a demure look. His eyes locked on mine. He was already smitten. I pushed aside any guilt that I might feel at the fact that I was planning to use him. All I could afford to see were dollar signs in the form of his sparkling cufflinks and fine-tailored suit. I gave him another once-over, my eyes lingering on his hair. At least he didn't have plugs. I much preferred a balding man over someone who's feebly babbling his genetics. I'm Regan Osbourne, I said, keeping my tone casual as I returned my attention to the crowd. I haven't heard of you. Ouch. Well, I haven't heard of you either, I snapped without thinking. I pressed my lips together, holding my breath. The fear that I turned him off was unfounded. Instead of recoiling, he sidled in a little closer. I fought the urge to roll my eyes. Men, especially the rich and self-entitled ones, never seem to like good, nice girls. Why haven't I heard of you? He didn't make it sound like an insult. He seemed genuinely curious. Well, he hadn't seen my art. I swallowed, pushing aside that invasive thought. I'm between projects. My work is more private. He nodded, and I had the dreadful feeling that he was reading between the lines. He knew I was a fraud, untalented, delusional. Ms. Tejal almost didn't have her work displayed here tonight, he said. Sometimes you just need to know the right people. At that, I perked up. I tried to hide my interest. Do you know the right people? He didn't reply. Instead, he gestured for a waiter to bring him another drink. I needed to learn how to do that. The right people, I repeated impatiently once he had a drink in hand. Sylvain's cocky smirk was back. Miss Tejal had a benefactor, a man sponsoring her dreams. Otherwise, she wouldn't be where she is here today. I stifled a snicker. So she has a sugar daddy? Sylvain's cerulean blue eyes sparkled with amusement. I'm not privy to the details of their arrangement. His eyes dropped from my face, and I waited patiently, trying not to laugh. Was he implying that he was interested in being my benefactor? I finished yet another martini, my fourth, fifth, and Sylvain beckoned for the waiter to bring me another. I giggled, then clamped my mouth shut, embarrassment flooding through me and heating my cheeks. I might not have been drunk, but I was well on my way there. Are you trying to get me plastered or something? Sylvain smirked, then took a sip from his glass. I thought I heard him say, or something. I blinked. What was that? His lips curled into that same arrogant smile, but the alcohol infusing my blood and the blood in my veins made it seem less annoying, more beguiling. He didn't answer my question. The rest of the night was a blur. I remembered laughing a lot at things that seemed funny at the time. I remembered telling him that he reminded me of James Bond because of the suit and the accent, but informing him that the beloved MI6 agent had a full head of thick hair. I remembered leaning heavily against him and whispering seductively in his ear. I remembered waving goodbye to a stoic-looking Amrita as I left with Sylvain, my arm linked around his waist. I remembered entering the cab, but not leaving it. Read it. Did not giggle too much. Great. Yeah, so that was chapter 1 and the prologue. So I don't know if anybody has any questions about the story or anything. I'm just gonna drink some water because my throat's super scratchy.
What was your inspiration to write this book?
That's a good question. So I'm a librarian and I work as an academic librarian. And when I was working at the University of Windsor, I was the nursing liaison. And I would get a lot of questions about like experiences in the ER or the emergency department and like those types of like quality of life questions. But then one time I had a student come in who had a question about mirror therapy for phantom limb treatment. And I was like, that is really interesting. And I was kind of like, really like, I did some more research after that. And then I was thinking about like how it kind of already, I don't know if anybody's familiar with like mirror therapy, but it's like to kind of rewire the brain when you're missing that limb to not feel that pain in the missing limb anymore, because you're thinking that it just kind of, you trick your brain into thinking that it's the other hand instead by using a mirror. And I just thought it was really, yeah, it's kind of lend itself to psychic, like paranormal type of story really naturally. And so I was thinking about like, oh, what if somebody sold their hand and then somebody else was wearing it and they could sense it through some kind of experimental drug, one might say, in this book anyway. But yeah, so I thought it was really, yeah. So basically I just got it from that poor student who's like, I think I helped them. I'm pretty sure I remember it. And just like say, go, like my story is coming to me. But yeah, and I also had a lot of fun in the story too with like the imagery of like mirrors and stuff, because like the killer, without giving anything away, because the killer observes it fairly early on. But my main character, my killer, you can kind of tell probably from the first chapter, my main character is pretty narcissistic, and the killer is too, right? So it's kind of they're kind of mirror images of each other. Yeah, I'll just leave it at that. Yeah.
How long have you been working on this?
That's another good question. Thank you. Yeah, so I wrote the first draft in, I think it was 2017 during National Novel Writing Month. I tend to always participate and create a new first draft every time. And so, yeah, I guess I wrote it then and then I kind of put it aside. I did actually finish the story like during that month. I mean, I did end up changing the end because the end was a total bloodbath in the original. The was like, let's murder every single character that ever existed kind of thing. And no spoilers, but maybe there's some survivors in this one. But yeah, and then I kind of put that away, and then I was looking for a full-time job, and then I was working on Ghosts of Thorwald Place and trying to get that published, and then I came back to this one. Yeah. Yeah.
So by that logic, you have more drafts than yours.
I have so many drafts. Yeah, I finished up one, and then for National Novel Writing Month this year, I'm planning on revisiting a novella I wrote. So I actually have the whole core story written already, but I'm going to rewrite it and add, because like it was very rushed in the middle because it was just a novella, and it definitely makes for a nice full length. And I'm going to add some subplots that complement the main themes. I'm very excited. Yeah. Yeah.
What's been your favorite book you've read this year?
That I've read? Oh my gosh. Do you follow me on Instagram? I read like 200 this year.
Well, what are some of the top?
I know. I'm thinking, oh my gosh. Okay. I feel like I have to scroll through my Goodreads. I've read some really good ones. Maybe I'll just like remember the last couple of months. I recently read Night's Edge by Liz Kieran. I don't know if anyone's read that one. I really liked that one a lot. And I'm really excited. I didn't know it was going to be a series. So I'm like, oh man, I'm hooked for life or for however long she keeps writing books in that series. And I recently read Fantastic Land. I really liked that one a lot. I don't know, some people are nodding. I don't know if anybody else has read it, but it's basically kind of like Lord of the Flies at Disney World, and it's told entirely through interviews with the survivors, and it's just like really cool. But like it's kind of, because of the nature of it being told through interviews, it's a little slower. It says it's a thriller. I think it should be considered a horror, but I don't know, because it can't really be that thrilling when it's like every interview starts with backstory and then it gets into so like it's not the fastest pace, but it's really good. Yeah.
Are all your drafts somewhat spooky or paranormal?
No. I have one rom-com. Yeah, I wrote that during the pandemic because I needed some lightness. And I have like 2 kind of fantasy, but I mean that's still like they're maybe a little spooky, but they're more fantasy. But yeah, I'm trying to focus on this genre first before I start writing more in other genres. Yeah. Yeah.
What is it about this genre that has you so,
Yeah, that is a good question. It's a tough one. I said a good question because I knew the answer. Like, I don't know. I think I just like spooky and dark stuff. I don't know if I have a better answer. Yeah.
Since you were asked about books that you read, can you tell us some of your favorite authors?
Sure. I really like, I mean, I read across a lot of different authors, but I think some of my favorites, I'm just thinking of Kelly Armstrong. I don't know if anybody's a fan, but I did go to a writing retreat with her this summer, so I'm like obsessed like with her writing right now. And I've always was a huge fan. Like back in university, I read like all of the, well, up to however many she had written of the Women of the Otherworld series, which I was obsessed with. But yeah, I think she's up there. I've actually just noticed that Tess Gerritsen released another book, so I'm really excited to read that one. I don't know if there's any Tess Gerritsen fans here, but yeah. I think those are my 2 major ones, I guess. Don't know if there's any other questions or. I'm probably gonna think of more authors too, like since I'm not under the spotlight, literal spotlight. Yeah.
What's your favorite part about writing this book?
Ooh. I did enjoy writing like a kind of mean main character. It was fun, and like she's very like she's very different from my protagonist in my first book, where she's kind of a runner. She hides from fear, like from danger. Whereas in this book, she's more self-destructive and she just gets in front of danger and then she regrets it later. And she's like, you could probably tell, like, even from the first chapter, she's got her vices and like, she's like, it's all part of her self-loathing aspect. And it was kind of fun to write that, but also as I went on, I was really mean to her. With like, and there's this one scene, and I don't want to spoil it, but I wrote it and I gave my initial draft. I knew what I wanted to have happen in it. I wanted her to do something she can't come back from. And then I ended up kind of giving her the easy way out with my first draft. And I went back and I was like, this is going to happen and you are going to be rock bottom. So that was fun, but I'm a bit mean, I guess, too.
Is it surreal to go back to it since it's been so long since your first draft?
Yeah, it feels weird. It does. And like it's kind of weird. Like I think I have like a really bad memory because when I reread my stuff, sometimes I'll be like, oh, she should say this next. And then like a paragraph later she says it and I'm like, okay.
Wrote it.
Right? It's almost like I'm like, is that unoriginal or is it just because like I can't remember what happened? Like, but yeah, like I find it feels weird to reread like stuff that I wrote. Like even rereading this first, because like this draft or the final draft was finished in January. So like rereading it to practice, I was like, oh, it's like she's mean. It's like, oh my gosh. Yeah. Yeah.
When did you start writing? How old were you?
Oh, okay. My mom found a copy of a short story I wrote in grade 2. And I didn't even really, I remember writing it though. It was like about a vampire that would poke people with needles. I guess I had a fear of needles, but also it's kind of funny because it's like you have teeth, you don't need needles. So I did like find that. And I know I wrote this like novella, kind of a Halloween themed novella in grade 7. But then after that, I don't think I wrote a lot until I was an adult. And I had a story and I was like, I'm going to try writing it. It's probably really bad. I'm afraid to look at that one. I have no idea what it's about. But, but yeah. And then I wrote this, not this one, sorry. Then I wrote The Ghosts of Thorwald Place was my first official novel that I wrote, or first draft of, yeah. Yeah.
Between the two of the books you published, do you have like a favorite or like a book baby or?
Oh man, that's a good question. I was actually thinking, like wondering about that. It's probably my first one because it's my first one, right? But then like I felt really bad because like on October 5th was the 2-year anniversary of when I came out. And then my publisher was posting and I was like, oh, I forgot about you, my baby. And I felt so bad. So I like quickly like did up a reel for TikTok and Instagram. I was like, yeah, I still love my book. It's like it's just been so like focused on this one. Yeah. So I think that's probably my favorite. Great. Thank you everyone for coming. I have books over here and swag for both of the books if you'd like to have some. Yeah. Can you tell I'm a writer? He's like so eloquent. Anyway, and there's also I think I already said it, but I don't know if some people came in when I was reading, but there's also like little cards for I wonder maybe I should do that now actually. Yeah, that makes sense, right? Yeah. I mean, did everybody have a chance to fill one out? Okay, never mind then. Okay, all right, so I will sit here. And if you want to get a copy, you can come.